this is Dominic, wedding DJ.
And this is Serena, wedding planner.
And together we are the Wedding Duo. We are here to talk all things weddings.
Planning a wedding can be stressful, but we are here to help.
So before you say, that's it, we're going to Vegas, don't go to Vegas.
Let's have some fun.
Join us as we answer your wedding questions and help navigate planning one of the biggest days of your life with the Wedding Duo.
Welcome back to the Wedding Duo podcast.
Yes, welcome indeed.
Yes, we're so excited to have you all back for another episode. And as always, we appreciate you listening to previous episodes, following us wherever you follow us, Instagram, TikTok, watching the episodes on YouTube. But here we are.
I'm still kind of, amazed or surprised when I talked to one of my brides. We're planning with one of our brides and they go, oh, I was listening to your podcast the other day. I go, wait, you people listen to it? I know they do. I know you are listening. Thank you. But it's still kind of
it's humbling.
I think the videos, like we have interaction like constantly with like a TikTok or an Instagram or a post and somebody replies and say, oh, we did this or this is a great idea. For the podcast, we kind of throw it out there.
Yeah.
But then when people come back and mention it, I don't know, it still feels new, even though I think we're on episode 40.
I think this might be, and if not,
4-0.
We're close. And we are officially a year into our podcast. So hooray!
Like
cue the fireworks.
More episodes a year into it, but
come on, we've been doing a lot.
I know, we're pretty diligent. We haven't missed many weeks.
No, we try, right? Between managing the business and the family and all that good stuff.
We have 3 kids. Anybody notice that out there in the world? For those of you with parents, okay.
Yeah, and they take priority. Sorry, guys.
Funny that.
So today's episode is heavy, okay? And we're just going to start with that because we're going to be talking about if you have lost a loved one, okay? Whether it be a parent or a sibling or a close friend.
Or a grandparent is a very common one as well.
Right.
Like maybe somebody you were close with, a grandparent that passed away recently, or just somebody that
you wish could be there.
Somebody that you love that you wish could be there but isn't.
Right. And so we're going to talk about, first of all, like how to handle the wedding planning process if that person isn't with you. And then, of course, ways to honor them on wedding day, because it comes up so often in our social media. People ask,
so often,
how do I honor my father or my sibling, and that is a huge deal. It is a big deal because this is a very big emotional day. And of course, it shines a huge light on the fact that this person is no longer with you, right?
Pick a day and something, a song, a landmark you drive by, and you're going to have this memory and you flash back, or just something happens, whatever in life. But your wedding day, like you said, goodness, if ever there's a day where you're going to feel that void, that's probably one for sure. And I was just doing a video on this the other day, and I felt just like, I was trying to like squeeze all this stuff in. And this is a lot of times how we come up with these topics is, gosh, we need to do a podcast on that because we have to take a deeper dive and just talk through some of this stuff, because it's really hard to cram it all into a video to put on our social media. So here we are, because I know, like she said, this comes up far too often.
It does. And so for all you couples out there and brides and, family members who are planning a wedding and, there's someone there, especially if it's a recent passing, right? Like I know, time can help heal. But if something is going on where the person has passed recently, that can be very challenging to not go to the place of, oh, I wish they were here to help with this or to see this, right? So it's completely understandable that there's a certain amount of kind of amplification of the grief for when you're planning your wedding without somebody.
And this is, we'll throw out a bunch of ideas, things that we've seen, things that we, like, but this is not unlike any other part of the wedding planning. There's going to be something that maybe speaks to you in your relationship. And you think I think that's appropriate for me. And something else, you're like, why would somebody ever even do that? Like, because people have different ways of grieving for sure. Right. And different ways that they want to remember what was their connection?
Yes.
Maybe you both like to read. Maybe you both like the movies. Maybe you both like the music. Oops. And there may be something that, like I said, that we might mention that just is appropriate for the relationship and the memory and all that stuff.
Right. And I think to just chat a little bit about the process before the actual wedding day. I think it's important in grief and just in general to like express your feelings, right? Like find ways to talk about how you're feeling and find somebody you can connect with that can help be by your side through this process. Whether it be you have a sibling that passed, and so you're putting together favors and you wish that they were there. Express those feelings to whoever is with you, and maybe have a moment of prayer or silence, like while you're doing these things, to honor them. And just I think it's important in general just not to be afraid to express those emotions, right?
Yeah, and even if it's like that day, right? And we were just talking about this. I said I've had couples that say, maybe the bride, maybe it was father of the bride. That's the one that is comes up a lot, actually. But so maybe they said, you know what? Get my sister up here, get my brother up here, get my mom up here, get your aunt or your uncle, like the people that knew him best, if it's, let's say, father of the bride in this example. And before you put on the makeup, right? Because that's a thing, 4 hours of hair and makeup, then you don't want to cry it all off. But have a moment. Maybe you look at pictures, maybe you laugh about some stories, you hug it out, you cry, because here's the word you always say, right? Say it. What is it?
It's cathartic.
It is very cathartic to
Yes.
cry, to remember that person, to say, we wish with all of our heart that you were here,
right?
But get it out, because, it's supposed to be a celebration, right? It's supposed to be a celebration of you and your significant other making this commitment to each other. And I guarantee you, the person that is no longer with you wouldn't want to wreck your day, right? They wouldn't want you to drag that with you all day and have a really sad, heavy heart all day.
Yes.
But you're human and you miss them, right? So it's almost like, and I don't want to say check the block. That's like negating how serious it is. But to have that moment, to have your cry, and then say, we wish you were here. Okay, let's party. Let's have a celebration.
Let's move
because
on.
Again, they would not want you to have a bad day because of their loss.
Yes. And then there's also many ways to honor their presence at the actual event.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these.
Yeah. So a lot of times we suggest, and we've talked about this, we've touched on it in previous podcasts, so we're probably going to repeat ourselves a little bit, but the ceremony is actually one of the most appropriate places to, have a moment of silence or something said that touches on those that are no longer with you. So that, because the ceremony is just by nature a little more serious.
Just the environment, right? It's just everyone's seated, they're quiet. There's no music blasting in the background.
Right. And you've got
drunk, have a conversation behind you. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got the officiate up there. They've got everyone's attention. Right. And, obviously if you're religious, there could be a prayer involved. So that tends to be a good spot for including some type of memory for those people, especially if it's a parent. I feel like if it's someone that is, like a parent or a sibling significant to you, I think it's a really appropriate spot.
Well, there's a lot of grandparents that were parents, basically, like that filled that void, or were just a second parent or second mom. The moment of silence is really nice. And even if it's just a moment, not even a moment of silence, but before you say, we're going to have a moment of silence to remember those that have passed, especially,
and you name the people.
You list off grandma, whatever, somebody, uncle, somebody passed, papa, whatever, whoever the person is that you want to mention. And then everybody kind of just has a moment where you smile and remember them. But if you want to go beyond that, and I'm always trying to think creatively, like we've had people that have used a particular song during the ceremony that was a favorite of the person that passed. And whether it's an instrumental one or just the actual song, that's really can be beautiful. Or if they had a favorite poet, for example, or maybe a favorite book, you can read a part of the book. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can bring in a part of that person or something that was special to them that you shared, right? With the two of you.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that obviously the wedding is about the union of you and your soon to be spouse. So a lot of couples don't want to like dwell significantly on the loss of, this person, but they just want some touch of that person in the ceremony somehow. So it really needs to be what speaks to you and the level of, involvement you want in your ceremony or any part of the day, really.
And a lot of it is sometimes one of the things I've done, I did a video on it and then I talk about it a lot, is the grandmother of the bride had passed away not long before and they were very close. So the third chair in from the altar on her side, it was mom sat there, dad sat there, and then there was a picture of her with her grandma. in the chair. And a lot of people commented on the video saying, well, nobody could even see it. And I'm like, but who is it for, right? Is it for the guests, or is it for the bride when she gets up there, take the hands of her soon-to-be husband and turns and looks at the crowd? There's mom, there's dad, and there's grandma, right? That's grandma's seat. And that's something that people do a lot, is they save a seat for that person.
Yes.
In honor of them. So it's like your point, like maybe you don't want to make a big deal out of it. You want to make it a little bit more subtle.
Yes.
And is it for you to remember? Is it for, and there's nothing wrong if you want to have everybody remember them, of course, right? But but there might be something you just want to say, I don't care that anybody else sees it. I want to be up at the altar and look and see the seat and have my favorite picture of me and grandma right there up front. Yeah. Which is really sweet.
And speaking of something subtle, so I've had several brides who have included in their bouquet, right? Because you're going to be carrying your bouquet with you as you go down the aisle. Either had a scarf wrapped around, or a brooch, or a piece of jewelry that is there from that person, so that you literally have that in your hands as you're walking down the aisle, and you can hold it and say a prayer to yourself, or remembering that person is.
And you definitely carry that with you all day. So that's like
exactly.
It's something you do need to make sure that it's secured in there pretty well, because I've had people that had like a family heirloom or a locket. Yeah. And things get bumped, knocked, fallen down. So just something on a side note, zip tie that thing in there. So make sure nobody tosses out the bouquet and throws that stuff out with it. Because
we try not to toss out the bride's bouquet, but
I agree. Yes. So the other one I want to mention is I had a groom not long ago, and this really stuck in my head as well. And he had lost his mom. And he went down the aisle just himself, carrying a single red rose, and he put it on that first chair. And that was a seat for mom.
Right, right. Again, symbolic.
Simple.
Nothing was
beautiful.
said.
It was really pretty.
But very touching to him, for him, right? And then also for the rest of the guests who obviously, probably knew the situation. So there are those subtle ways you can, as we mentioned, have something said so that all the guests are involved. But it really needs to be a personal decision and what speaks to you in your relationship with that person, right?
Because I remember him telling me, like, my mom loved roses. And there it was. That was like, so it was very special, emotional. He got to carry that down there for his mom, and then put it on that chair. It was really pretty.
Now, the most common thing we see is couples will set up a memorial table, right? And this is actually, really a wonderful idea, because a lot of times there's more than just one person, right? And so you have several family members that you want to honor. You can purchase signage or a candle or both that, state something to the effect of, if heaven weren't so far away, you'd be here today, I think, or something to like that
most
effect,
have,
right? And you burn a candle for those. And then the guests get to see those photos as they walk in. Now, something that I talk through with my couples is the placement of the memorial table, right? I have had couples who say, we're going to put it in the foyer out front. And then I have other couples who say, like, well, I don't really want that to be the first thing people see when they walk in. It's totally up to you, right? But just be mindful maybe of where you put the memorial table in your whole like overall aesthetic and, placement of your layout.
It's something to be thought about too. But I mean, usually sometimes that entryway is just where they come in. Maybe there's a guest book, they sign there, they see the memorial table. Some people will, if it's a friend from work, they will look at the pictures and be like, I guess these were family members.
Right, they won't know.
And then you'll have your aunt that comes in like, oh, there's, and then so it's not for everybody. It's going to be for the people that knew them, right? And of course, between the two of you, there might be people there that, your fiance never met because they had passed away a while back. But some people do grandparents, like I said, but it's a very simple, tangible, easy. I mean, it's not hard, right? You just find some pictures, candle, and you don't need to have a sign, but a lot of people put a sign up there, right? But
right, absolutely.
But it's very simple and it's very powerful still. It's very moving for sure.
Yes. And to that point, you can ask, family and friends to get you pictures, right? Because sometimes you don't have the photos readily available. And, get a few frames. And then, like you said, it can be very simple, very easy to do, and a really good way to honor those memories.
And on a side note that we've brought up before is if you have somebody that you really need to give them a job and they're really under your feet. Right. If that's something like, can you track down grandma's picture and ask, email these people and see if they can't
get
get
you a
these
good
pictures
photo,
together,
yeah.
and you can take care of the memorial table. That's it's an important job, but it's a great job if you want somebody like, what can I do to help? And you're like, you can get out of my way. Oh, actually, you could, if you don't mind, I would love to have a memorial. And I would think I would be honored if somebody asked me to do that.
Right.
Or I'd be
Absolutely.
like, are you just trying to give me a job to get
No,
rid
you'd be
of me?
suspicious.
So some other things that we've seen that are other ideas. And this was something I'd never seen before, but it was the bride's uncle, because dad had passed away. The bride's uncle went up and he was giving a toast and was saying nice things about the couple. And then of course he said something about his brother, the bride's dad. And he said, and because he was missing him as well, right?
Of course.
So he opened a beer, and I remember it was a Dos Equis. That was his drink. And he goes, you know what? This one's for John. And he opened the beer and he set it on the sweetheart table. And he goes, nobody drink it. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. Don't drink the memorial beer that he opened up.
Don't.
But I was like, what a great idea. That's like, because everybody knew, like, well, he always had a Dos Equis whenever there was a party or whatever. So it was a very unique way to do it. But if I don't know, if the person that you loved had a drink, or I don't know, something like that, you could think outside the box. You may be thinking right now, like, oh yeah,
right,
dad always had a pipe or whatever. I don't know, whatever it was he had.
I had a couple that had a set of grandparents who always played chess, and they had a small table set up with a chessboard.
Oh, really? I didn't know
that. And it was really, I mean, people could come and play chess, right? But it was in honor of them. And it didn't really matter that all the guests didn't know that that's why it was there. Exactly. The couple knew, the couple's family knew. And they knew that was why they had put it out there, and that if, grandma and grandpa were there, that's what they would have loved to have seen, right?
Yeah, and we're in Texas, so here's another thing that we see a lot. We've seen this a few times where it was a gentleman, I think it was the bride's dad, but his boots and his hat, his cowboy hat and his cowboy boots were both at the altar. They sat on the chair, and then they came in and they sat at a chair at the table,
right,
as well. And you don't even have to have something on. You don't have to have a picture. You can even just save a seat at the altar. It can just be an empty chair, and you know who it is.
Or you put a sign that says reserved for. You can put their name, or you don't have to. Yeah.
And then you can do the same thing at your head table, or at your parents' table, or something like that. So that's something else you can do. That's pretty simple as well.
Right. And I've, as the coordinator or the planner, I've been in charge of moving those items, right? So you can have your coordinator or, a family member, be assigned to move those items from the ceremony chair to the reception chair. And what I've done too is, if it's just an item that's going to be sitting on the seat, then when we get to the reception, we'll usually put a small, just votive candle, right at the place setting, right? Because you don't want anyone to accidentally sit there and eat, but it's helpful to just kind of have that candle burning also.
It's funny with a hat. For years, when I was fighting my hairline, I was wearing a hat. And a lot of people always associated me with a hat. And I was like, you associate me with a hat? But when my grandfather passed away, one of the items that I was given was a fedora that he used to wear. And he would always wear a fedora, right? It was like the old man fedora. And I got it. And so he was from Luxembourg, but he never made it back, like his heritage. He was from, as am I, obviously. I'm a generation down or two. But so when I was stationed in Germany, I traveled to Luxembourg and I had his hat with me, and I wore it while and it was a weird thing, kind of like a way for me to like say, he never got there. So I'm holding it together.
He's trying,
so I was
guys.
wearing his hat, and a lot of these pictures I took, I was in his hat in Luxembourg.
That's wonderful.
And the girl I was dating later, she's like, she saw a picture and she said, why are you wearing that stupid hat? And I'm like, oh, you are going to feel terrible when I tell you why. And she was like, I'm sorry. I go, well, you don't. Yeah, because it was an old man fedora. And she's like, what? That is why? Because I was usually in a baseball cap, if anything, right? That was not the usual case. So I can't blame her for saying it, but I'm like, you're going to feel pretty stupid when I tell you what it is. But it is funny how, and I don't even know if it was that hat, but it was just like a style of hat that he would have worn. And it was obviously his hat. But I mean, that's something that, what is it about that person that maybe
that you remember?
Yeah. Jacket, hat, boots.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's when it comes down to those personal conversations between you and your family and friends, and what could we do that would really represent this person, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about music.
Well, before we talk about music, one of the things I've seen a few times that people don't do them as much, but man, years ago, there was almost always a slideshow. And here's the baby pictures of the bride, here's the baby pictures of the groom, and here's the pictures of them together. That was usually the run of show for the slideshow. And man, it was very trendy for a while. I see it occasionally, but not as much.
Right.
But that's if you were doing a slideshow, including pictures, almost like at the Oscars, right? When they have the pictures of people that have passed in the last year. It's a great way to put up some pictures of, people do it anyway. Bride as a baby with dad holding the child or whatever, like all those pictures. But it's extra special if you have those pictures and that person's not here, right? Because you'll hear that just the whole crowd kind of go, oh, something
I recommend though, we, like he mentioned, we rarely do slideshows. They really have gone out of style, I think. But if someone's gonna put pictures or in a slideshow format, it usually works best to just kind of have them playing, right? Not to actually sit and take up a significant amount of time to sit and watch the slideshow.
Oh, that's what they did. It was like end of dinner.
It used to be that way.
Slide out the projector, put up the screen, tape the cord down real quick, watch the video, and then, okay, we're going to do the first dance. Wait, I got to get that off the dance floor. Slide it back out, put it away.
People will still look at the pictures and talk about them like if it's playing during dinner, but it definitely, you can kind of avoid eating into your timeline by just playing it during those portions.
Oh, even better than that. You don't have to have still pictures on your memorial table. You can put up a tiny little TV with even a thumb drive and stick it inside and just have a slideshow. And it can be those same slideshow you would have shown during dinner, but it's just on a loop in a corner on a table, on the sign-in table. And it's just pictures of y'all when you were together as a young couple, but also you can have those slideshows of that person that's passed away. And you can have that moment where you're not sitting there in front of everybody. You just kind of go over to the side and anybody that knew him or her can just kind of see the pictures and be like, oh, I remember that day or whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's really special.
So it's like the Oscars. That's what I was saying.
Very much.
How often I sit down at the table to talk to somebody, a best man that's doing the toast, the mother of the groom that's having a dance. And I sit down at the table if there's an open seat and the conversation kind of stops and they look over at me like,
what are you doing here?
Can I help you? And I always say, oh, I just like to fill the seats, like at the Oscars, and people for pictures and stuff. And they go, what? Like, who are you? Like, what do you, usually they've seen me by then. I've already made announcements and stuff, but they're like, you're odd. I'm like, I am. It's good that we know that.
I can vouch for the oddness.
Get this out right now.
As his wife.
But that's my little icebreaker when I sit down.
Yeah, you have quite a few. I have absolutely heard you say that. So let's move on to the music, okay? Because
the
music, as we know, as we've talked about dozens of times, is such an emotional, can be really like touching and bring back memories. It's one of those senses, right? Your auditory sense. So obviously there's ways to incorporate music into remembering someone on your wedding day.
However, you have to tread lightly because I have this memory and it is seared in my brain. I was just sharing it with our staff before we came in here.
I think we've shared it on the previous podcast.
Oh, but well, this is the best time to say it because there was a bride and her two sisters wanted me to play You Should Be Here by Cole Swindle. It's a country song. If you don't know it, look it up. It'll make you cry. And it will make you cry if you don't even have somebody that you associate with a loss. But it was in the middle of the dance party. And I was like, hey, I want to make sure we fit this one in, and I made sure she was there with her sisters. The three of them were out there singing it at the top of their lungs, but a lot of other people were around bawling, like just bawling.
Right.
And I looked at the photographer who I'd never worked with before at one point. I mean, we'd been working together for the last few hours. And I look at her and I both have like tears coming down our face because it was just such a heavy, emotional moment. And I was glad they were able to have that moment. And again, it was their day. She asked me to do it. And of course we did it.
Absolutely.
But I mean, it was
heavy.
And of course now, and it's not just that moment, but this is in the middle of the dance party. So as the DJ, what am I supposed to do after that? Like say, let's get the party going, wah, 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 and jump into LMFAO. Like, I had to be very cautious coming out of that moment.
Yes.
So I basically played I said, I know being a good MC is so advantageous. And I'm very happy on those moments when I've had years of experience on the mic and I've got a pretty heavy, Rolodex of things I could say as I'm scrolling through my head. But I basically said I was like, clearly he was missed. I'm sure he's looking down on all of you right now, wishing he was here. But I feel like he was here in spirit. I go, I'm going to do a slow song. Y'all can dance this one. So I did a slow song, just a regular old slow song, just to put some space between that moment and because my job is to run the party, right? And I'm like, okay, I did a slow song, I did a sing along, I think it maybe like a Sweet Caroline to kind of ease it back in, and then finally get the dance party going. And we were able to continue the party. I remember we ended it; it was epic. It was a great party, but man, that was just like derailed the train in the middle of it all. So just use caution if that's something that you're thinking about doing. You can do it, but just tell your DJ. Have a plan coming out of that moment.
Yes. And to that point, I have been at an event where the MC was not paying attention to what was said during a speech. And literally the bride's parents had both passed away. And the bride's brother, who obviously it was his parents too, was giving a speech and speaking about his parents. And immediately after the speech, the MC, who again,
not one of ours. He was not one of ours. He was not part of our team.
Who I can only guess was just not paying attention. Just let's hear it for the best man, and then like played this like weird noise. I don't know. It was just awkward and really like cringy. I was like, oh gosh. So that's something I will say. We have a portion of our DJ planner that asks for sensitive situations. And the reason we ask for this kind of information is so that we can be aware of, if the parents have passed or if there's something we should be aware of, so our MCs can.
I do not want to step on a landmine that I was not prepared for. And sometimes it's, that's one thing, right? Like, but there have been, it just says like, is there anything sensitive in the family? And if you have something sensitive that you're already thinking about, tell your MC, tell your DJ, tell your planner so that they can be aware and they can either have velvet gloves if they're talking about it, or just not like walk into it. Cause I've had people say like, oh, well, my parents haven't been in the same room together since they got divorced when I was 6. I'm like, okay, well, make sure I don't be like, let's get the bride's parents out here. Come on. And they're looking at like everyone else that knows is like, yeah, DJ, let's see what happens. Keep going down this road. This is going to be exciting. Or I had another one where they said, hey, don't play any Louis Armstrong. And I'm like, oh, okay. And they were like, well, grandma just passed away. She loved Louis Armstrong. We played a lot of Louis Armstrong at her funeral. I'm like, oh, okay. And
that makes sense.
Yeah. And they were just like, we just had it. Like, we're not here to, we had our wake, we had our ceremony, we had our funeral, but now we're at the wedding and we'd rather not, and I'm like, okay, absolutely. It's your day, of course. But I'm like, I'm glad I know. I don't play a lot of the Louis Armstrong, but he's on several playlists of mine. So
sure.
There you go. It was like that was a thing. But here's the thing I would like to suggest. If the person that is no longer with you had a particular artist that they loved, let's say they loved the Beatles, they loved Elvis, Aerosmith, Temptations, whatever, Ray Charles, let's say, you can play a fast song. And as a DJ, I've done this before. I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't know our bride's dad, he was a huge Van Morrison fan. So we're going to play Brown Eyed Girl. I invite all of you to come out and bounce around and dance as we remember him through this song. And you start the song, and you can have a happy song and a happy moment and remember this person through through the music and not be like a sad slow song. It doesn't have to be a sad slow song.
It absolutely doesn't. But a lot of times people also especially if it's the father of the bride, they'll have someone walk them down the aisle in lieu of that person, either a brother or a grandparent or an uncle, and then they'll also share a dance with that person in lieu of the father or daughter dance. And just as you mentioned, if there's an artist that was special to your dad, right, you can still utilize one of those songs for that dance so that you're dancing with your uncle, you're dancing with your brother, but in the back of your mind, you're remembering your father because that song is playing, right?
And you can ask your DJ to say something about it or not. You can just be, he and I know why we picked this song. Like my brother and I are dancing.
And mom, maybe
mom, So, mom. Some brides go down the aisle with mom or with a brother
or share a dance with mom
or not at all. Like you can go down the aisle by yourself. You're saying it should be dad's not here. I'm going to walk by myself down the aisle.
Right.
Or same thing with the dance. Like if it's not dad, I'm not dancing. I mean, you don't have to do any of the things you don't want to do. But yeah, it's very common to have somebody else fill in. Gosh, that question comes up all the time. Whenever I do a father of the bride or mother of the groom category, here come those requests. And it gives me pause every time I see it. Because it's like, you start talking through these events and hey, and it's dad and it's your mom. And then you're like, what if dad and mom aren't there? And you're like, oh, I'm sorry. That's got to be painful every time you see one of these posts. And it's really,
Right. And we are very aware of it. When we see those comments, it hits on our heart, right? We're like, we feel for any couples going through the wedding planning process without someone. And that's why we wanted to address it today on the podcast, because
Absolutely.
we really know how much this day means to you, but also, how much not having that person there means to you, right?
Yeah.
So it can be a hard path to walk. And there are ways to honor those people and to have those moments. But we do understand that it's going to be sad, right? And I always say, like, I think it's healing in a lot of ways, like we mentioned previously, to cry and to feel those emotions. That's okay.
But it's maybe hearing this lets you know that there's other people that are going through the same thing
Yes.
that you are, if you're out there struggling with this, because it comes up far too often.
Far too often. So you guys,
but there you go.
We appreciate y'all so much for listening.
Before we start bawling.
Yeah, I need to have a moment.
I knew this was going to be hard, but I was like, all right, let's get into this, because I'm a crier anyway. But these are kind of things that really don't judge me, people.
I'm done judging you for crying because it happens too often.
You're judging me right now.
No, never.
So totally judging.
Find us on Instagram, TikTok, watch these episodes on YouTube, or listen wherever you podcast. You can also check out our website, theweddingduo.co, not .com. And we appreciate you, like I said many times, so much for following along and supporting us.
And like we always end it, and this is, like I said, this comes up all the time on our topic. We're like, this is a great example, but this is another one. It's your day. Just do what fits the two of you, what fits your personality, what fits your relationship in this particular case. Don't let somebody talk you into something you don't want to do, or talk you out of something you have your heart set on. It's your day. You do you. Seal it with a kiss. Mwah. Bye. Bye. Hey, so thanks for listening to our podcast. If you found any of this information helpful and you know someone who may be engaged or is a maid of honor, maybe you could tell them and share it with a friend. Absolutely. So screenshot this episode, share it on Instagram, on Facebook, and tag The Wedding Duo. We promise to share the love back. Also, if you are interested in more resources or the show notes, you can go to theweddingduo.co. We have one-on-one virtual sessions, a shop, all sorts of fun stuff. Check it out.